Today, the River Rhine is one of Germany's most popular tourist attractions. Yet just over 50 years ago, the skies above the river witnessed a desperate air campaign. During the Second World War, American and British bombers constantly pounded the Ruhr, Germany's main industrial region, which lies just east of the Rhine. Indeed, the Royal Air Force began to attack it from the summer of 1940. It gradually became clear, however, that it would take a long time to achieve a decisive effect on the German industry there. The Ruhr occupied a very large area. The RAF had relatively few bombers. Their bomb loads were small and bombing accuracy was generally poor. Perhaps, though, Germany's war industry could be dealt a mortal blow if a critical precision target could be identified. For if its war industry was severely crippled, Germany's ability to sustain its war effort would be seriously undermined. As it happened, as early as 1937, the British Air Ministry had identified such targets in the region of the Ruhr, north and east of Düsseldorf. These were the reservoirs that supplied the main industrial cities of the Ruhr with much of their water and electricity. Destroy their dams and the Ruhr would come to a halt. But the conventional bombs of the day were limited in their effect. The largest was the 4,000-pounder. Even this did not have sufficient explosive to cause much damage to the massive structures of the dams. Horizontal attack was also considered, using air-launched torpedoes, but these also lacked sufficient explosive. But Barnes-Wallis, a skilled aeronautical engineer, had been independently considering the problem for some months. Previously, he had had much to do with the design of the R-100 airship. This had, however, been scrapped after its rival, the R-101, had a fatal crash. Wallis had also designed the Vickers Wellington bomber, backbone of RAF Bomber Command during the early years of the war. Its basket-like geodetic frame made it an extremely tough aircraft, much liked by those that flew it. Wallis's first idea was to build a massive 10-ton bomb. At the time, however, the RAF had no bomber capable of carrying such a monster, not even the 4-engined Halifax and Stirling, which came into service during the first half of 1941. Wallis, therefore, proposed a new 6-engined bomber, but the Air Ministry turned this down. Using the facilities of the Road Research Laboratory on the outskirts of London, Wallis continued to investigate a way of knocking out the Ruhr dams. In the meantime, the bombing offensive against Germany continued. But although some damage was being inflicted, the German air defenses were growing stronger, and it was becoming an uphill battle. However, the first months of 1942 saw some dramatic changes. First, the Avro Lancaster came into service. Capable of carrying a 12,000-pound bomb load over 1,700 miles, it proved to be one of the outstanding bombers of the Second World War. The British bombers also received a device called G, which, using radio beams, enabled the aircraft to navigate their way to the target much more accurately. RAF Bomber Command also had a new leader, the single-minded and determined Bert Harris. His uncompromising view made him better known as Bomber Harris. Meanwhile, Barnes-Wallis had hit upon a new concept for attacking the Ruhr dams. He concluded that horizontal attack was the only answer, but how could it be done? The answer lay in the traditional game of skipping stones across water. Barnes-Wallis was certain a bomb could be designed to do this. Sink just by the face of the dam and then detonate at a predetermined depth. In December 1942, Wallis managed to obtain a Wellington bomber to carry out trials with a full-size spherical dummy bomb. After some abortive attempts, he succeeded in getting a bomb to bounce no less than 16 times. But parallel trials using a Mosquito fighter bomber were also taking place at the request of the Admiralty. Using a smaller version of the dam's bomb, they saw it as a promising anti-ship weapon. This was codenamed Highball, while the dam's bomb was known as Upkeep. Bomber Harris was initially highly skeptical of both schemes, calling them tripe of the wildest description. He feared that air crews would be needlessly sacrificed, and was also concerned over the diversion of precious Lancasters for the dam's attack. But he was overridden, and full development of both bombs got underway. It was decided that Upkeep should be used against the dams in May 1943, when the reservoirs were at their fullest after the spring thaw. By now, Upkeep had a metal cylindrical core containing the explosive. This was encased by wooden slats to give it its overall spherical shape. Orders for this were now placed, and factories worked day and night to produce the bombs and modify 20 Lancaster aircraft. In 1943, Harris ordered the formation of a special squadron to carry out the attack on the dams. This formed as 617 Squadron at Scampton in the Lincolnshire Fens just 2 days later. 24-year-old Wing Commander Guy Gibson was selected to command 617 Squadron. In spite of his tender years, he had already proved himself an inspirational leader. After flying Hampden bombers during the first year of the war, he had transferred to Beaufighter night fighters and shot down at least 3 German aircraft. In March 1942, Gibson had taken command of a heavy bomber squadron initially equipped with the 2-engine Avro Manchester. This was the predecessor of the Lancaster, which the squadron was later given. Gibson had in fact just relinquished command and was about to have a well-deserved break when he was given his new assignment. Gibson was given carte blanche to select his own crews, and during the next 3 weeks they reported to RAF Scampton. At this stage, all the air crews knew was that they were to undertake a special operation. They noticed, however, that the bomb bays of their aircraft as they arrived had been specially converted. Very low-level flying practice was the first task, since Wallis had stipulated that the crews would have to carry out the attack at an altitude of just 120 feet. He himself was now perfecting the bomb in a further series of trials, using a Lancaster for the first time. An early problem was that the wooden cladding kept breaking up as it hit the water. But when it was realized the cylindrical core seemed to bounce happily across the sea without it, Wallis had the cladding removed. Upkeep, in its final form, was a drum containing nearly 6,000 pounds of Torpex. It was set spinning before it left the aircraft so as to ensure that it would bounce on hitting the water. The bomb was also fitted with a hydrostatic fuse, designed to detonate it 30 feet below the surface of the water. By now, 617's crews had been told that their target was a dam and had begun to practice over English lakes and reservoirs. But they were now told that the attack had to be delivered at 60 feet and found it impossible to maintain this height. This problem was solved by fitting 2 angled spotlights, their beams joining up when the aircraft was at the correct height. Another problem of knowing exactly when to drop the bomb was solved by a simple aiming device, which lined up on the dam's towers, as seen here in the feature film of the raid. At the end of April, the primary dams to be attacked were confirmed as the Möhne, the Sorpe, and the Eder. Wallace, though, was continuing his trials, and on the 11th of May, Gibson and 2 of his crews dropped upkeep for the first time. The other crews followed over the next few days. Photo reconnaissance Spitfires flew sorties to check on any significant changes in the defenses of the dams, and final preparations for Operation Chastise, as it was called, were made. Only now were the crews told their targets. Apart from the primary dams, 3 others, the Lister, the Ennepe, and the Diemel, were designated last resort targets if for some reason the primary dams could not be attacked. 19 Lancasters and their crews were available for the operation. They were organized in 3 waves. The first group of 9 aircraft would fly over the North Sea and across southern Holland and round the Ruhr, before turning southwards to the Möhne Dam, and then to the Eder. If they had any bombs left, the Sorpe would also be hit before they took a more northerly route home. The third wave of 5 aircraft would use the same route, starting 2 hours later. The second wave, also with 5 Lancasters, would take a northerly route out and fly direct to the Sorpe Dam. Having attacked it, they would also take a northerly route back. But the German air defenses were by now formidable, with radar, searchlights, guns, and night fighters well coordinated. In order to evade them, 617 Squadron was to fly both out and back at very low level. Led by Gibson, the first wave began to take off shortly after 9:30 on Sunday evening, the 16th of May. Flying over the North Sea at 500 feet, they crossed the Dutch coast. They then navigated their way to the Ruhr. In spite of occasional bursts of anti-aircraft fire, there were no problems until one Lancaster hit a power cable, killing all the crew. The others pressed on. Arriving over the Möhne shortly after midnight, Gibson was the first to attack. His bomb was slightly off target and burst on the reservoir bank. Gibson now tried to draw the fire of the German defenses while the second aircraft made its attack. The Lancaster was hit during its final approach, and its bomb overshot the dam, but struck and destroyed the power station beyond. The aircraft itself crashed 9 miles from the target. The third bomb detonated short of the dam. Undeterred, the fourth aircraft began its approach. Its bomb bounced remorselessly towards the target. It struck the dam and dropped back into the water. After sinking the prescribed 30 feet, it detonated. A fifth bomb completed the destruction of the Myrna Dam. An hour after Gibson, it crossed the Dutch coast, but then ran into the German air defenses, which were by now well alert. One aircraft was shot down, and 2 others so badly damaged that they had to return to base. A further Lancaster fell victim to another power cable. This left just American Flight Lieutenant Joe McCarthy to press on to the Sauper in his aircraft T for Tommy. On arrival, he found it difficult to get his approach right, and it took 9 passes before he dropped his bomb.
Now, we're too high. It's too late, skipper. It's too late.
It hit the top of the dam, but there was no breach. Again, guided by Gibson, the 3 first-wave aircraft with bombs still on board attacked the Eder Dam. The third successfully breached it. 2 dams out of 3 had gone. This left the reserve wave of 5 aircraft, which had taken off at 11:30 p.m. Unfortunately, 2 aircraft were shot down on the outward leg of the flight to the Sauper, and the others were unable to breach the dam. The surviving aircraft landed back at Scampton between 3 and 6:15 in the morning. The survivors of the raid were immediately debriefed in the presence of Bomber Harris himself. With 2 dams breached and a third damaged, it had been a spectacular success. Yet Barnes-Wallis wondered whether the cost had been too high. 8 out of the 19 aircraft had failed to return. 53 members of 617 Squadron had been killed, and 3 others were prisoners of war. But Prime Minister Winston Churchill, then visiting the United States, was in no doubt that Germany had been dealt a grievous blow and told Congress so. A few days after the raid, 617 Squadron was honored with a visit by Their Majesties King George VI and Queen Elizabeth. They met all the surviving Dambusters, as the squadron was now called, including American Joe McCarthy. Gibson was also able to explain exactly how the attack had been carried out. In truth, though, the effect of the raid on Germany was not as great as was claimed. Admittedly, there was some extensive flooding, but industrial output in the Ruhr hardly faltered. Nevertheless, the dam's raid raised the stock of the Royal Air Force to a level not seen since the Battle of Britain 3 years earlier. Guy Gibson was awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest bravery award, and 33 other members of 617 were decorated for their valor in a special ceremony at Buckingham Palace. They had displayed courage of the highest order. Guy Gibson was now in great demand to give a boost to the war effort.
You're taught resourcefulness, courage, devotion to duty. In other words, you're just being taught the things which will stand you in good stead in the service. And so I say to you, good luck and best wishes for the future.
He also did a tour of the United States and then became a staff officer. But he still managed to fly on operations, piloting a Mosquito. Sadly, on the night of the 19th, 20th of September 1944, he was shot down over Holland and killed. His squadron, however, lived on. Equipped with the 12,000-pound tall boy bomb, also developed by Barnes-Wallis, it took part in attacks on the Tirpitz, eventually sinking her in November 1944. Then, armed with Barnes-Wallis's massive 22,000-pound Grand Slam, 617 aircraft made successful attacks on German bridges and viaducts. The 617 squadron lived on after the war. For many years it was equipped with the Vulcan V bomber, and once more based at Scampton. During the 1980s, it became one of the RAF's first Tornado squadrons. But the Dambusters, who flew on 617's very first operation over 50 years ago, will never be forgotten for the skill and courage they displayed that night. A night that witnessed one of the greatest air epics of all time.